Hello and welcome to Moving Forward, a podcast by Good Habits. I'm your host, Amy Clark. In this podcast, we make sure you get all the insights you need to build a high-performing learning culture to future-proof your organization. Whether you're an HR professional, a learning and development manager, or anyone looking to give your team a leg up, you'll learn the trends and tricks you need to get your people learning and moving forward. In each episode, we invite an expert or two to unpack some key statements designed to get them sharing their best insights. And today, we're talking about the employee experience. What is it? What influence does it have on learning and development? To help me unpack this, I'd like to welcome Iris and Jennifer. Thank you so much for joining me today. Please introduce yourselves and tell us what led you on your learning journey and why are you here today? I'd like to start with you, please, Iris.
Okay, thank you, Amy. It's great to be here. Pleasure to be here. So my name is Iris Prüfer. I'm CHRO of the MediaMarktSaturn Retail Group. Originally, if I look 25 years or more than 25 years back, I studied economics. And after that, I was pretty much in HR, taking care on the whole employee life cycle. So from attraction, taking care on all employees through the life cycle. I used to work for 12 years in the service industry. And after that, I found my passion for retail industry.
Great.
Why is that? Because I found that I found very interesting environments, a lot of transformation, growth, and where I really could shape together with my team culture as well as employee experience. So this is what it's all about.
Oh, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for that great introduction. It's so nice to have someone so passionate with us. And I'd like you to please tell us what brought you here today.
Yeah, also thanks that I have the opportunity to be in such a great podcast. Haha, no, just kidding. I'm Jennifer. I'm a coach at Good Habits, actually. So that's why I'm here. I'm originally from Austria, from Styria. This is very important to me because it's the same region as Arnold Schwarzenegger is from. Yeah. And before joining Good Habits, I studied journalism and communication. But I always moved towards more the organization side of things and found my passion in internal communications, actually. And then switched a little bit to recruiting, marketing, employer branding. And yeah.
So really the whole life cycle as well.
Exactly. And then like 3 years ago, I thought, okay, now it's time to take a switch of perspective again and switch seats. And now I'm at Good Habits, where I can consult other organizations on, how it is with learning and developments, what are the important steps to take there.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. It seems like we have a stellar lineup today. So as you know, we structure our podcast around a couple of statements, which we'd like you to discuss. So our first one is this. Evolving needs and expectations ask for an improved employee experience. And I think I'd like to get your take on this first, because also what is an employee experience?
Okay, happy to do so. So maybe I'll give you a bit of background about MediaMarktSaturn, the retail group, so that you can, let's say, I can bring that in a bigger
we need
perspective.
That context. Yes, please.
So MediaMarktSaturn operates 1,000 stores with more than 50,000 employees in 11 countries within Europe. Last year, we had a revenue of more than 22 billion euro with an online share of 22%. Why is the online share important? Now I would like to do a short step back, looking 3 years back in our history. At that time, we really saw the need to change to become an omni-channel retailer. Right? And thus we refreshed our strategy and further developed it. We came up with 4 strategic pillars in our strategy: shopping experience, impact experience, usage experience, and the 4th one was employee experience, which is amazing, right? So it was an extremely important starting point for us. Why? Because it shows the importance of the employees driving omni-channel experience to become really excellent in our industry.
So when we're talking this 3 years ago change, we mean you're largely a retailer, sort of brick and mortar stores, needing to go online, needing to revamp everything.
Yes. So looking back, we were we were very much focused on brick and mortar business. And we wanted to create a pure omni-channel retail experience. So starting in online, then moving to the stores, and also include services. So come up with a really new experience for our customers. So from product sellers mainly to really solution providers. So this was a big mental change for our employees, for the whole organization, and it started a transformation process.
Now, part of the statement was talking about the changing expectations, and I'd like to get your take on that. What we mean here is the expectations of employees, I think. So what are those expectations?
Well, I think it's always so funny when you are in marketing, you always think of a product life cycle and you think about, okay, where are the touch points to sell the product, that people are exciting to use it. And then when we switch to the employees, we kind of tend to forget that. So that's why I think employee experience is so important, that you think about, okay, why people should be working for my or the organization? What are the crucial touch points that people love to do their job, their profession? I mean, we spend so much time with our job, so we should be happy doing it. And then think about, okay, so how can we make this appealing that people really want to give their best and put their hearts into it? And this is why I think it's getting more and more demanded also from the employees, because it shouldn't just simply feel like a job. So this has a lot to do with generations and how things are changing. And
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've seen it myself. We are seeing a company more and more like a service we subscribe to, and a company is almost a service provider in my mind, in that sense, to their employees. You're providing experience, a working experience. And just as you would change an internet provider if they were not reliable or transparent, you might do the same with the company. What do you think of that comparison?
No, it's pretty much true. You need to be appealing, create a great atmosphere, and people really need to want to work for you. So after we defined employee experience as one of our key pillars, it was really important to define what it means for us, to see different dimensions we need to work on, and what we then specify. So we defined clearly 3 dimensions. So there is a technical dimension starting with. So if you look at what kind of hardware, software, communication tools are you providing, how modern are you also offering currently AI opportunities to test it, like we do in a Sandbox currently? There is a second dimension, which is the physical environment. So the physical working environment. I mean, we've seen the beautiful offices of Good Habits today, very new work environment. We can create that in the headquarters, but it's all about also creating a good working atmosphere and working environment in the stores, which we mainly operate in. So important recreation rooms whatsoever. So very important second dimension. And the third one, of course, very interesting for HR, is the cultural dimension. So what kind of core values are you standing for? How do you treat your employees? How is the working atmosphere and leadership? How do the leaders treat their employees, giving feedback, further development? This was a very much key. And after we defined it, what employee experience means for us, we continuously communicated it. And it was, let's say, one important point we found out. Communication is key, but find appealing examples and stories which really touch the heart of the employees, because it's important to involve them, to see, to make them aware that they are part of the employee experience.
It's a whole journey.
Yes.
Interesting. You mentioned the internal communications part of it. I know you've got some background
that
there.
fills my heart.
I mean, are we seeing organizations doing this? How in terms of communicating those values, that culture? What do we see?
How should I say this in a polite way? No, they do. I mean, I think those organizations which are successful, like in bringing the culture to life, they communicate a lot. So they have realized that communications is key, and somehow it's still like the part people are often forgetting about, or because they say, okay, now we put the principles, core values, however you like to call it, on the walls, so they are visible to see. That's enough, right? But actually, it's not enough. It goes far more beyond. Like, how are we treating each other? What are the principles we are going to act on? And and this needs a lot of explanation, especially when you're introducing maybe new core values or new principles. And I think there the key is really to involve people, like I was just mentioned, to take them on the journey. And it's not like that HR sits in the ivory tower and says, okay, now we have, I don't know, 5 good sounding words, and those are then the principles.
Yeah,
Actually,
they sound great.
Might not work in the long run.
Awesome. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You mentioned something earlier about, well, you mentioned generations changing, and I also wanted to get your view. Have you seen the demands of the employee experience changing recently? Like, what is it that employees are actually looking for?
Yeah, it's like the overall experience they have within the organization. And yes, it's different from Generation Z to the baby boomers, so we see different needs, but we very much listen to our employees and act according to their feedback on that. But yes, in a nutshell, we see different expectations, like more flexible work. Younger generations look for the purpose in the thing they are doing, right, and to contribute to that.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely loop back to that later. But in the meantime, we're ready to move on to our next statement, which actually you've touched on greatly, and that is really about core values. So the statement is, core values demand unwavering commitment. This is an interesting one. How do you go about defining these values? Maybe you can give us some insight since you recently did this revamp.
Of course, happy to do so. It was a parallel process 3 years ago. So in 2021, we looked at our core values, what we believed in, and we aligned it internationally within the 11 countries in the group. Based on that, we since then link every initiative, every measure we have within HR back to our values. So it's a core foundation we saw and we defined. So looking at the values, we distinguish between company principles, which apply to all employees, like the way we cooperate, the way we focus our customers. We are working, embracing also change. So this was very important. And we see leadership principles on top. So leading with clarity and trust, being a role model, developing our employees and shaping a sustainable future, to name a few.
Brilliant. That's very, very in-depth. I appreciate that insight. If anyone's needing to go through a revamp, you've given some core ideas on how to actually get that done. We were talking about how these core values get communicated. What are some mistakes we're seeing in the industry?
I wouldn't call it mistakes, because there's always room for improvement, of course.
Very positive mindset.
I think what sometimes is getting overlooked is that, okay, you now have the core values, everybody knows what they stand for because you communicate it, but actually sometimes people need also help and advice how to act on it and how to do it, especially when you say, okay, we have leaders and they have their own leadership principles. So what does it mean? So, and here we come to the learning part and the development part. So also that you make sure that people get the right training, that they don't feel lost or like, okay, now what should I do? And I think this is maybe a part that's also gets then overlooked, that for some people who were involved in the process, it's clear, but usually not to everybody. It's so clear, like, okay, now we say for example, we show integrity. What does integrity mean, for example?
What does it look like in practice?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And with that, let's talk about the importance of core values in the first place. Why do we need them? What's your take on that?
Well, for me, it's like the base. When you build a house, you need a solid foundation, and then you can build upon it. And I think it's a good way also to navigate yourself as an employee. So what are my values, my personal ones, and do they connect with the company values, and can I see myself working there?
And I think with that alignment would also come a huge amount of benefit. I mean, I imagine, I've seen it myself, you have much more engaged employees, you're happier, you feel the sense of purpose. And I would hazard a guess that this change also we're seeing in expectations now also comes with, I think, people feeling like they want to do something that really resonates with them on a personal level. What have been some benefits you've seen of this value alignment within your company?
Maybe I give you some practical examples.
We love practical examples.
Of course, I'm happy to give it to you. So, what we started with, looking at the employee life cycle. So we looked at attraction, and attraction is how do we form our employer brand, and we went back and thought about persona. So the kind of people we need in the organization. What do we need? What do we offer? And also there, we included the core values, and we took existing employees to communicate what we are looking for. So in the kind of Let's Go employer branding campaign, which we rolled out then. Second point, when we look for employees and especially for leaders, we very much evaluate do they fit to our core values. And on a senior level, we even use a development or assessment centers where there is a key, let's say, evaluation on that. We used to do it in the, or we are doing it in the performance management process, because we underpin the core values with behaviors we are looking for. So each and every manager is going to discuss during the feedback dialogue the core values and how all employees, also the manager, apply to them according to the behavior, only to give you some insight about that.
I love it. That's super practical. And I think especially when it comes to performance and hiring, being quite clear on what it is you're looking for in those senses, because of course competency is another story, but when you're looking for a cultural fit or that kind of thing, it's another story. But then what about this thing of the personality hire? Have you heard of that concept? When you hire somebody really based on the values, but maybe they don't have the competence.
No, I think it's both, right? You need to look at both. But if I look in many organizations I've seen, you look at the what side. So how do the people perform? How do they act according to their, let's say, the requirements of the job? So the technical ones, and you have technically professionals, people managing their organization, but don't act according to values. So from my experience, it's more that you have great performers not acting according to values than the other way around. So it's to find a balance. It's not either or, but to combine it and to find a balance.
Get those A players who are aligned and competent.
Ideally, or work on both, exactly.
Do you have anything to add to that?
No, what I see with the organization I work with is the clearer the values and the principles are, the more successful usually the organization is, and people are eager to develop and to go the extra mile. I mean, I'm sure there are also numbers and statistics behind that, but just based on my view and what I experience also when I then go to the organizations to advise them, it really behaves like that. It goes somehow hand in hand.
I imagine so. I mean, also we're talking about performance. There seems to be like a circle at play. If you're aligned with your values, your performance is going to increase. But also if you look at performance through the lens of values, you have a good metric through which to actually have a good conversation with employees. But how do you manage this with 50,000 employees? That's what you said, right?
Yes.
That's just crazy.
I think key is the international HR organization, because we are working really as a close community, aligning on projects and like performance management, which we then develop internationally, listening and aligning very much with the business. This is key too, because it doesn't matter if you have a great concept from an HR perspective that it doesn't resonate with the business and with the business managers. So we work in a close cooperation internationally in the HR community, developing and rolling out. Second point is, of course, there are local agendas which they drive through and they implement successfully. And what we do then is look at best practices, which we scale and implement again. So this is really how you leverage the power of the group. And I think this was really a key success factor.
Oh, that's really great to hear. And then how do we really drive this commitment? Because the statement initially, let's say, is core values demand unwavering commitment. What else is there? Commitment just seems to be one thing.
What else is there? I think it's commitment, it's a belief, and it's the passion for the organization. So every employee is key part of driving the employee experience. This was something we also communicated and which we, let's say, transport or communicate to our employees. And their passion, their mindset drives not only employee experience, but customer experience in our organization, thus performance. And this is the way how it interacts. How do you see it?
And it's a long-term road, the journey you take together. I think this is maybe also something you tend to underestimate in such a core value process. You think that, okay, now we've got everything and now from tomorrow we wake up and we act completely different. No, it's always a long, especially with culture, it's a long-term process and a long-term commitment. And when I think of management nowadays, especially in larger corporations, I mean, you have new management 2 to 3 years. That's like often not a long enough period, to really establish certain values, certain principles. And maybe that's then also sometimes, the thing when you go into an organization, feel like, okay, they have something, but something feels off.
It's not fully rolled out.
Yeah.
You really said something that resonates with me about that management changeover, because it does also filter down. And if you're not really equipped to drive that cultural value, it is quite difficult. But one last question on this topic is, where do values and strategy come into play? Because that's another thing that has to get communicated regularly. And do you have a value strategy sort of interplay?
Yes, so we communicate on both, on our strategy development, the results, but also linked to the values. We put a lot of effort in communication on different levels. Only to give you one example, our CEO does regular CEO updates every 6 to 8 weeks, and not only talking about strategy development, but also, let's say, passion he sees in the fields, meeting people. So he's traveling around a lot and giving the example. So let's say I met Peter in this organization, and he did the great thing and and he made a great impact in terms of cooperation or customer focus. Or
you're highlighting these values.
Yes, absolutely. So it's really all about communication. We all do that. So the country board do it on a regular basis. HR does it in different aspects. So it's really continuously working on it, but also communicating it.
And that really must be nice from an employee perspective, because you're providing very consistent employee experience. You're also giving some recognition, it seems like, on the way. Sounds like you're really nailing this employee experience.
Yes, we do. But I also agree to Jennifer. It's a way you need to continuously work on it. I don't want to say, well, everything is brilliant and perfect. No, it's not. It's a way we started 3 years ago, and you really need to put all your efforts in the whole organization. Big senior leadership involvement, as well as HR involvement, other department involvement, and the involvement of the leaders to bring it forward. But it's a development. It's a path you need to follow. I completely agree to you.
Lovely. Well, this brings me on to my next statement, which is actually a question I've been dying to ask. The statement is, empowering employees outside an office environment requires different tactics. And now with this, of course, we do mean the retail environment where you're in the shop floor, for example. I'm really curious how you go about creating this whole experience.
So we looked at the evolving requirements and needs from our employees. And to be very honest, during the Corona time and the crisis, we tend to do a lot of e-learning. You need to do mandatory stuff, and we provided additional e-learnings. It's great, but you also need additional on the workflows, really present training, so one-on-one trainings. So what we did last year, for example, we trained trainers per store. So there's minimum one trainer who has gone through the trainer session, providing workshops in several aspects. So last year, key focus was service and solution, how we thrive customer experience forward. And there were 7 workshops in a row for all sales employees in the sales floor. At the same time, we did a great cooperation with Good Habits and rolled out Good Habits internationally, by the way, in all the countries. And then we also We also fostered the good habits scan, so the good scan, so to see your needs, so that you don't have to pick out of 100 minimum 100 trainings the one you might which might be helpful for you, but there are offerings which they do for you. So we did both. So hybrid learning environment offering on the sales for presence training and e-learnings.
I mean, that is really intentional. I love that. You're going at it from all angles. I'm really curious to see, how did you manage timing around that? Because, of course, people also have to do their day-to-day job. They're in the shop. How did you give people time?
It's a very good point. So we did 7 workshops with 4 hours, and we learned that it's a lot of time we require from the people on the sales floor. So involving that further on new Training 2.0 initiative, using still the trainers on the sales floor, is going to start right now. And there we are basically focusing on our core values and how we bring them to life in terms of fostering our customer experience. So it's bringing together both targets, so customer experience and bringing culture to life. We do 2 hours workshops now along our principles. So we still we still develop and further develop it, and that's how we do it. But we scale it up all over Europe. We developed it internationally and rolled it out again.
Awesome. That sounds amazing. Yeah, the timing is difficult. I mean, I recently went through a management development program myself, and it was a couple of hours a week, but it's amazing the intensity that it can create. But the outcome has been really great all around. So that's wonderful. Do you have any advice for retail spaces or sort of your non-office environment organization? What are you seeing? How can they really help their employees learn and provide that culture?
Yeah, well, what's the challenge is really that you have a totally different working environment. I mean, we desk workers, we are quite lucky, right? We sit in front of our desk all day and can sneak in some learning bits and pieces we're just about to do. It's not possible when you're on the shop floor. And especially, even if they have the devices, I mean, come on, it would look strange if they run around on their smartphones and the customer walks by. So it's simply not feasible to do it like that. So I think where some room is to be flexible when it comes to when learning can happen, whether there are special rooms that people can go to, or they have the freedom to learn from anywhere on any device. And then there are different approaches how you can credit that. This is then also a country and cultural thing, because, for example, Germany, Austria, I think even Switzerland, we are rather strict when it comes to work policies. So sometimes the attention of the organization would be there, but there are some work regulations where it's not simply possible. Okay, do your stuff wherever you like to, and then you get some credit points. But okay, maybe this might change in the future. Let's see. And what I also see that in the past, it was sometimes underestimated that I'd like to call them non-desk workers, that they also want to grow and develop, because there was sometimes this stereotype, they are not keen on developing. They want to do their work and then they go home and forget about everything. And I think that's a stereotype.
Underestimating people.
Yeah, totally. Because I used also to work in a production environment, and there I can tell you it's the same thing. People like to develop themselves. They just need the opportunities, and they also want to be seen, and then sit down with the managers and think about, okay, where are the areas that you like to develop, and how can we make it possible for you that you find the time and that you can coordinate with your other colleagues. For example, if you work in shifts, okay, how can we make it happen? And then maybe go to micro learnings or more bite-sized learnings. I mean, of course, it's like utopic that after an 8 or 9 hours shift that I'm capable enough to learn 2 hours on a course. I mean, nobody of us could do that. Yeah. So we have to become more creative when it comes to the learning methods we are going to provide. It's not like we can use the concept of the desk workers and just put it on the non-desk ones. This was what might be the easiest way, but I'm pretty sure it's not the effective one.
Not a one-size-fits-all approach. I think you make a really good point. But you talk a lot here about, especially the motivation of people to work. Have you experienced trying to get people interested in these learning and development when they're not so motivated? How do you build that motivation within your people?
We thought about now a new approach, and we will implement that as of this year. So we implemented the performance dialogue, and I mentioned briefly before that we have the what part, so how are they performing, but also the how part, looking at our core values. And what we did together with Good Habits was to look at suitable courses according to our values. So if there is a discussion that there could be an improvement in customer focus or using technology, there are, let's say, up to 10 suitable possible courses. And so the line manager can discuss concrete content and align with the employee in the performance dialogue doing this content. And then it's like a kind of mandatory course because they both align on it, and we foster the learning in that space. So it's something we try now because we saw that more than 50% of all employees now did the good scan and saw it, but they really need to come up with the willingness
Yes, you need to
take the time. So to do it in small steps and link it to the performance dialogues, this is the way how we try to do it now.
What I also like is what I'm hearing a bit of variety here. So you have a certain skill or something you need to work on based on a value. There's a couple of options actually. And I feel like that also helps a little bit with the motivation. Like you don't have to do this exact course for this exact reason, but this is a general area. And you have a bit of freedom in that.
And choice, and you can discuss it, and it's part of the dialogue, you know?
That's very important.
It has to involve. So it has to be in the common understanding of the manager that it's really their responsibility to discuss it with the employees, but also that self-development is part of the employee journey. So it's both. And we wanted to foster this dialogue and put a bit of motivation in it.
It's so refreshing to hear because I think what just my pet peeve in learning and development has to be the learning and development managers who just like send a link and like, hey, you should do this training. And then that's the end of it. And
exactly.
That's not a dialogue. I think dialogue is very important.
Sometimes you need to do it. If you have mandatory training, health and safety,
First aid, you have to do it.
You have to do it, and there won't be a way around doing it, but we want to put it on a different level now.
Especially when you're talking values and employee experience. They're much sort of softer things that you need that buy-in for. We're going to move on to our final statement. This is that the landscape of quantifying HR initiatives is evolving. I'm going to go for you. Because with your projects and your recent reshuffles, you must have really thought about how you measure what you're doing.
Yeah, and I mean, we are looking at a bunch of KPIs, business performance KPIs, HR KPIs, and we discuss them with the business, of course. But we wanted to have one special indicator about how employee experience is perceived within the organization. So we implemented an employee survey, which is called Net Promoter People, NPP survey.
Okay.
NPP surveys follows the metric of NPS, which is very well known.
Net Promoter Score, right?
Yes, exactly. Same metric. So core question is, would employees recommend us as employer? But we add 12 sub-questions in the area of leadership, development, communication, cooperation, to give some of the examples. So we do this NPP survey twice per year, and we look in-depth into the results. So we do measurement workshops, and every leader needs to deduct minimum 3 actions. Whoa. So, and then work on it until the next NPP survey.
So just to get that practical, they'll see the results, they'll see maybe there's some areas that need to work on, and then they need to decide on how to address it.
Yes, together with the team. So they are sitting together looking at the results because they are anonymous. So you can't say, Paul, Michael, or Lisa provided this feedback. It's an anonymous feedback, but they see that they have an issue in communication, for example. And one of the measures is a team, let's say, team meetings every week, and additionally, every fortnight, a team out for going bowling whatsoever, or hiking or whatsoever. And then you look after 6 months when you do the next survey about the fact if these measures are implemented. And we have one key question, which is, do you see that the actions are taken? And 74% of all employees in the group agreed to that. So just to make it clear, this entropy survey is done with every employee in the group, and 74% agreed to that. And so this is a good sign. And NPP is working on a scale from -100 to +100. And looking back, we started with a result on group level of 0, which was,
neutral.
let's say, a starting
Can
point.
go both ways.
Yeah,
Could be worse.
yes, could be worse. That's true. And within 3 years, we increased to 35, a score of 35, which is really great. And we have a participation rate of 73%. So high participation.
That's what you need.
High feedback about actions. It is seen that we take action accordingly. And so, to summarize it, yes, we are on a way. I'm very proud of the results, to be very honest.
Good.
But we are on the way. You need to further develop that, have even more buy-in of the leaders. I mean, senior leadership is very much involved, but we need to involve every leadership level. So that's
Now, this is a survey that you created yourself as an organization based on, of course, this NPS. What else are you seeing as a metric commonly used in other organizations?
What I really like is that it's more qualitative also made. So you dig into it. It's not just a number that you get out, because what's currently happening, many organizations, they look at the quantitative side and they're coming up with some numbers because we need numbers to prove it. But in the end of the day, especially when it comes to these topics like experience, it's sometimes hard to quantify. And you can see it by other numbers, maybe like, is your retention good? How is the engagement level? And what I really like is now that more and more organizations also start to have a look at the qualitative side of things and really, dig deeper into it. And what I really like about Iris' approach is that MediaMarkt Saturn, they really follow up, because you can have employee service every year and then you get a result out of it, but nothing is happening, nothing is going to change. And so then people also get frustrated because they're thinking, why are you asking me? You're not changing anything. So why should I keep
It's just
participating?
another survey.
Right? So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
But
you're right.
Iris, what I was wondering was, because we were talking so much about values and principles and the scores that are quite good, what are happening with the people who are maybe not so following through in the actions they are supposed to take?
It's a very good question. So in the first years, we really wanted to establish the survey and the method and the follow-up and taking actions. And now we really go forward and think about those leaders who get a more critical feedback and do special follow-ups. And then, of course, in a further step, we might need even about more consequence management. But it was really building trust first, developing actions, and then you need to dig deeper in the next step. This is the next step. We don't do it so far. We look maybe at those who are below the average, but this is what we are going to start now.
Something else you mentioned in the way that you measure with this metric is you mentioned whether they will notice that the action has been taken or they're acknowledging that it's been taken. That is very objective, of course, which is what you want. But what about feeling that the action's been taken? Because you can see an organization putting an effort, but feeling the effort is actually something else.
I mean, this is the most neutral number we have now. And of course, the other thing is, if you travel to the countries, you can feel the spirit, you can feel the passion. And this is a very subjective way of measure it. So then I can't prove. So let's go back to what we see in the numbers and try to follow up and dig deeper.
I think actually we've come to a very good point here, and that is when you are trying to quantify an initiative, you actually do need to quantify it. Like, you need to look at it objectively as possible. And I think a lot of pitfalls that people fall into is trying to measure a feeling or something that's maybe hasn't been noticed very well, hasn't been well publicized. Then you're actually you've gone too far ahead. You need to take a step back, look what you can actually measure. Brilliant. We can learn a lot from you, I think. It's time for us to round up The time has flown. Honestly, I really enjoyed talking to both of you. I'd like to offer you both a chance to leave one last takeaway for our listeners out there that are trying to build their culture, trying to build their values, trying to give a good employee experience. You can mention something you've already said. You can give us something totally new to think about. I'd like you to go first.
Oh my God. I'd say what came up during our talk was, well, in the time of change, and this is what actually today is, right? It's a time of change. There should be a constant that you can rely on, and this constant are the values and the principles you yourself, but also your organization stands for. And that's why it's really important to build a solid base that prolongs more than 3 to 5 years, that just people know, okay, even though we are maybe changing how we sell our products or the industry we're working in, we can rely on the principles because they remain the same. And I have the trust here that, we can manage and carry on.
I'm very inspired by that. I absolutely love that. You're right. We are in a time of change. We will always be from here forth in a time of change. And you're right, that solid foundation, just invaluable. What about you? Last words?
I agree to Jennifer. And on top of that, for us, it was an important starting point to really further develop our strategy, define employee experience as key pillar, refresh the values, bring everything together and measure it, and not only take it as a number, but follow up with actions. But I want to really state it's a process. We had that before. It's nothing you can switch on and then everything is bright and shiny. It's not. It's really a process, and we need to continuously work on that and improve that.
Absolutely. I think this process mindset is also really, really valuable. It's something I've started thinking myself. Stop looking at a job as a list of tasks. It's a process, especially when you're working with people. That's the bottom line. For me, I think the takeaway is what I said earlier, this idea that your employee is a client in a way. They are subscribing to what you have to offer, and you need to be valuable to that employee as much as they are valuable to you, and see it as a two-way street. That's everything for today. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for everybody who's joined us online. If you liked this podcast and learned something new, please share it with a friend or a colleague. You might help them move their people forward as well. And while you're at it, please subscribe. It helps everyone reach our content more easily. That's all for now. Until next time.